Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back with more ideas and opinions of Albert Einstein. Today we're going to read a longer piece. You know, it's pretty good size. Piece. This is called My First Impressions of the USA. It's an interview for Nieuwe Rotterdamsch. Again, Rotterdamsch. I apologize. My grasp of German is not that great, but yeah. Nieuwe Rotterdamsch Courant, 1921. It appeared in Berliner Tageblatt, July the 7th, 1921. I must redeem my promise to say something about my impressions of this country. That is not altogether easy for me, for it is not easy to take up the attitude of impartial observer when one is received with such kindness and undeserved respect as I have been in America. First of all, let me say something on this score. The cult of individuals is always, in my view, unjustified. To be sure, nature distributes her gifts unevenly among her children, but there are plenty of the well endowed, thank God, and I am firmly convinced that most of them live quiet, unobtrusive lives. It strikes me as unfair and even in bad taste to select a few of them for boundless admiration, attributing superhuman powers of mind and character to them. This has been my fate, and the contrast between the popular estimate of my powers and achievements and the reality is simply grotesque. The awareness of this strange state of affairs would be unbearable but for one pleasing consolation. It is a welcome symptom in an age which is commonly denounced as materialistic that it makes heroes of men whose goals lie wholly in the intellectual and moral sphere. This proves that knowledge and justice are ranked above wealth and power by a large section of the human race. My experience teaches me that this idealistic outlook is particularly prevalent in America, which is decried as a singularly materialistic country. After this digression, I come to my proper theme in the hope that there will be no more weight, in the hope that no more weight will be attached to my modest remarks than they deserve. What first strikes the visitor with amazement is the superiority of this country in matters of technology and organization. Objects of everyday use are more solid than in Europe. Houses much more practically designed. Everything is designed to save human labor. Labor is expensive because the country is sparsely inhabited in comparison with its natural resources. The high price of labor was the stimulus which evoked the marvelous development of technical devices and methods of work. The opposite extreme is illustrated by overpopulated China or India, where the low price of labor has stood in the way of development of machinery. Europe is halfway between the two. Once the machine is sufficiently highly developed, it becomes cheaper in the end than the cheapest labor. Let the fascists in Europe, who desire on narrow-minded political grounds to see their own particular countries more densely populated, take heed of this. However, the anxious care with which the United States keep out of foreign goods by means of prohibitive tariffs certainly contrasts oddly with the general picture. But an innocent visitor must not be expected to rack his brains too much. And when all is said and done, it is not absolutely certain that every question admits of a rational answer. The second thing that strikes a visitor is the joyous, positive attitude to life. The smile on the faces of the people in photographs is symbolical of one of the greatest assets of the American. He is friendly, self confident, optimistic, and without envy. The European finds intercourse with Americans easy and agreeable. Compared with the American, the European is more critical, more self conscious, less kind hearted and helpful, more isolated, more fastidious in his amusements and his reading, generally more or less of a pessimist. Great importance attaches to the material comforts of life, and equanimity, concern or unconcern, security are all sacrificed to them. the American lives the American lives even more for his goals, for the future, than the European. Life for him is always becoming, never being. In this respect, he is even further removed from the Russian and the Asiatic than the European is. But there is one respect in which he resembles the Asiatic more than the European does. He is less of an individualist than the European. That is, from the physiological, not the economic point of view. Or psychological, not physiological. More emphasis is laid on the we than the I. As a natural corollary of this, custom and convention are extremely strong, and there is much more uniformity, both in outlook on life and in moral and aesthetic ideas among Americans than among Europeans. This fact is chiefly responsible for America's economic superiority over Europe. Cooperation and the division of labor develop more easily and with less friction than in Europe. Whether in the factory or the university or in private charity. This social sense may be partly due to the English tradition. In apparent contradiction to this stands the fact that activities of the state are relatively restricted as compared with those in Europe. The European is surprised to find the telegraph, the telephone, the railways, and the schools predominantly in private hands. The more social attitude of the individual, which I mentioned just now, makes this possible here. Another consequence of this attitude is that the extremely unequal distribution of property leads to no intolerable hardships. The social conscience of the well-to-do is much more highly developed than in Europe. He considers himself obliged, as a matter of course, to place a large portion of his wealth and often of his own energies, too, at the disposal of the community. Public opinion, that all-powerful force, imperiously demands it of him. Hence, the most important cultural functions can be left to private enterprise, and the part played by the government in this country is comparatively a very restricted one. The prestige of government has undoubtedly been lowered considerably by the Prohibition Law. For nothing is more destructive of respect for the government and the law of the land than passing laws which cannot be enforced. It is an open secret that the dangerous increase of crime in this country is closely connected with this. There is also another way in which prohibition, in my opinion, undermines the authority of the government. The public house is a place in which is a place which gives people the opportunity to exchange views and ideas on public affairs. As far as I can see, such an opportunity is lacking in this country. The result being that the press, which is mostly controlled by vested interests, has an excessive influence on public opinion. The overestimation of money is still greater in this country than in Europe, but appears to me to be on the decrease. It is at last beginning to be realized that great wealth is not necessary for a happy and satisfactory life. In regard to artistic matters, I have been genuinely impressed by the good taste displayed by the modern buildings and in articles of common use. On the other hand, the visual arts and music have little place in the life of the nation as compared with Europe. I have a warm admiration for the achievements of American institutes of scientific research. We are unjust in attempting to ascribe the increasing superiority of American research work exclusively to superior wealth, devotion, patience, a spirit of comradeship, and a talent for cooperation play an important part in its successes. One more observation to finish. The United States is the most powerful among the technical, uh, technically advanced countries in the world. Its influence on the shaping of international relations is absolutely incalculable. But America is a large country, and its people have so far not shown much interest in great international problems, among which the problem of disarmament occupied first place today. This must be changed, if only in America's own interest. The last war has shown that there are no longer any barriers between the continents, and that the destinies of all countries are closely interwoven. The people of this country must realize that they have a great responsibility in the sphere of international politics. The part of passive spectator is unworthy of this country and is bound in the end to lead to disaster all around. So that is Einstein's impressions of the US. Him originally being from Austria. So, yeah. You got to remember at that point, 1921, World War One had ended just 3 years before. Um, America had made its presence known um, by helping join in towards the end to help tip the balance in a war that was consuming millions of lives in Europe. In fact, it would be a war that would um, fully break apart the teetering Ottoman Empire in the Middle East. So, yeah. And he mentions how sparsely populated the U.S. was. You've got to remember, the U.S. was not as heavily populated until the 1940s, 1950s during the baby boom. Thus, why some people are known as boomers, baby boomers. They were born in an age of unexplained growth and everything in the 1950s following World War II, which firmly put us towards the top of countries in the world. But would also be the start of our Cold War with the USSR. Excuse me. But yeah. But as always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Anyone tries to tell you something you have difficulty believing, ask them to cite their sources. But as always, I'll see you all in the next episode. Until then, later.